Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rob Lashley with MMORPG.com. Tonight I have with me Richard Garriott, aka Lord British. How you doing, sir?
Howdy, howdy. Great. Thank you for having me. Great to be with you.
Thanks for taking the time out of your day to come join us. I know you've been pretty busy doing interviews and hangouts on Google Plus lately.
Yeah, we're trying to make sure that we're, as we get close to the end of our Kickstarter, online basically 24 hours a day now, as much as we can.
So you guys got left 4 more days left?
4 more days, exactly. When we're already 30% past our original Kickstarter goal, and there's usually a spike at the beginning and sometimes a spike at the end. So we're hoping to get a spike at the end and to get up to somewhere. If we could, it'd be great to get past 1.5 and maybe even as far as $2 million here in these last few days. That would let us really pile on the extra features, so to speak, if we can.
Well, best of luck, and I'm really looking forward to it. First, let's get into your background a little bit. Who are you? What makes you so uniquely qualified to make a game of this scope? And what exactly is a Richard Garriott game?
Yes. So, well, I have the dubious honor of being one of the oldest people in the industry. And what I really mean by that is, I published my first game back in 1980, the prequel to the Ultima series, for which I'm best known. And as I got older, I did that at the age of 19, and as I got older, more 19-year-olds would get in the business. So I've perpetually been the old man of the industry, even when I wasn't old. But now I'm 51, and I really do have a few years under my belt. So hopefully that school of hard knocks has given me a little bit of street cred to produce a few good games. I've made in fact, all of the Ultima series, Ultima 1 through 9, and then Ultima Online. Again, I think those are the things I'm best known for, as solo player role-playing games and the introduction of massively multiplayer games. And now I'm kind of returning to my roots. It's my first time back in medieval fantasy after about 15 years. And so very pleased and proud to be bringing Shroud of the Avatar to players.
Well, welcome back. And there's nothing like a brand new baby in your family to keep you young.
Exactly right. Boy, let me tell you, as you know very well, since you're only about 3 months ahead of me, my 9-month-old is just wrapping up her milk bottle days. I have one here on the desk with me, and just starting to consume her first solid food. So it's very exciting times. It's
all uphill from there. So how exactly does Lord British fit into this?
Yeah, good point. And in fact, you also said, what is a Lord British? What is a Richard Garriott game? And to me, Richard Garriott is Lord British. About a little over a year ago, I wrote a treatise that I put up on my Facebook account that said, "What is a Richard Garriott or Lord British ultimate role-playing game?" And I sort of did a post-mortem on all my previous work to say, what things am I most proud of? What things would I really like to put into a game in the future? And that sort of became the blueprint for what we're really doing here with Shroud of the Avatar. And in particular, when you ask, how does Lord British relate to it? Lord British was always my fantasy character name that when I played, games very early in the, for example, pen and paper era of Dungeons and Dragons, British and eventually Lord British was my character name. And so when I started writing computer games, I naturally put Lord British in the game, just because why not? And this is long before there were published games, so it was I was just writing it for fun for myself and my friends, and it just sort of stuck. But I think that has actually worked well over the years to have not just me but the rest of the development team as characters in the game, so that even before we had multiplayer games, people sort of knew we were there with them. We were, kind of in this problem, in this quest, in the creation process of the game, arm in arm with the players. And I now think that's actually more important than ever, especially now that we have massively multiplayer games. I think it's essential that the developers have a persona that is in those games. And so with Shroud of the Avatar, Lord British, myself, will be in the game. Both, we're thinking at the moment at least, to both have an NPC in the game for when I'm offline that has a certain kind of function in the story, but also when I'm online, the NPC will go away so that I can tromp around the world and do whatever I want to do.
So everyone would be able to meet Lord British in game.
Exactly right.
Right, so how will this be like, and you mentioned it earlier that you're responsible for the Ultima series of games and Ultima Online. How will this be like an Ultima game, and how will this not be like an Ultima game?
Very good question. I've made no secret of the fact that I have 3 favorite Ultimas that I'm trying to emulate in some way with Shroud of the Avatar. First is, I look back at Ultima 4 in particular, but 4, 5, 6, and 7 as the best stories that I told in an Ultima environment. And so I want to try to tell a story at least as well crafted and at least as powerful as Ultima 4. And to accomplish that, that's one of the reasons I brought in Tracy Hickman, the author of the Dragonlance series, whom I've known for 30 years, and we've collaborated on some other things in the past, and I think he's going to help me really achieve that.
Street cred.
Yeah, exactly. And then my second kind of target is Ultima 7, where I think Ultima 7 in the solo player Ultimas had by far the deepest interactive virtual world, where literally anything you saw that looked like it could or should be usable was usable, and often to effect in quests. And I want to make sure that we accomplish that goal. In fact, my thing to the artists is, if you're going to draw something that looks interactive, don't put it in the game unless we're going to make it interactive. I mean, I want to stand my ground on making sure that everything that you feel like you should interact with will properly interact. And then the third area is multiplayer. I get credit, as I've mentioned to you before, I get credit for having coined the term massively multiplayer online role-playing game, even though I frankly don't necessarily think that's accurate. It may have come into existence through the Ultima Online development, but I don't know what team member may have done that. But when we made Ultima Online, as powerful as it was and as unique as it still stands, most MMOs are, I would argue, are in the EverQuest or World of Warcraft model, where every player is first and foremost a combatant and may have some crafting on the side, whereas Ultima Online was a game where your professions outside of combat could be your whole life, and that's still unusual in an MMO. And so we wanted to first make a game that fulfilled that destiny, but then also figure out a way to put story back in. And that's something that the Ultimas 1 through 9 you could never play with your friends. Ultima Online, you never really had an epic story that it was only the player story, which was of course very big and very powerful and very successful, but I kind of missed having a quest, an epic quest that kind of drove you through the content. And so we're now trying to bring things back together. And even though there have been a number of what I'll call spectacular failures in the MMO industry of people who have tried this, I think we have a very competent plan that will integrate these two. And it involves a technological solution. Which is that we're kind of breaking the usual client-server model in a unusual way that I think will facilitate storytelling and largely multiplayer all at the same time.
Okay, you brought up two things that I actually wanted to talk about in the next question. One is persistence in Destiny and massively multiplayer. Would you call Shroud of the Avatar an MMO? And if you wouldn't, why wouldn't you? Because right now we have companies that are going so far out of their way to not be tagged with the MMO that they've actually gone to great lengths to call themselves persistent online shooters, or POS.
Yes, and while I have no aversion by any means to the term MMO, I think that the way we're architecting Shroud of the Avatar is at least not a traditional MMO. It really does have a very different model, and let me describe a little bit about that model technically. And pardon, I think that a lot of your fans and listeners are fairly technical, so I hope this is not too deep a dive, so to speak, for them. But in a normal MMO, your computer is really a dumb terminal. It's just a graphical client for the game which is running somewhere in the cloud, as opposed to a solo player game where everything about the game is running on your machine. And one of the first things I wanted to do with this game is I said, look, I want to at least be able to now and then play offline. I want to, when I'm on the airplane, for example, or traveling, I want to be able to play. And then when I can reconnect, it should catch up, so to speak. If I've made a persistent change, add it back into the world, and download anybody else's persistent changes to me, and then let me get on with playing with my friends. And so to accomplish that, we had to change the architecture to where instead of just being client-server, we moved a server onto every person's machine. And then we only had validation and the persistent world itself stored on a central server. Another advantage to one more piece before I give you this advantage. Another piece that we did is we said, when you think about an MMO, when we built Ultima Online, there was only going to be one, what is now referred to as shard, one copy of reality. And it was only because of how successful they were that we realized we couldn't put everyone in the same reality. We had to build multiple copies of the world. And when you do that, it means that if you have a friend who started on another shard, you will never see them. And the only way you can join each other is to start over from scratch on their shard. And so we said, okay, we don't want to do that either. We really want to have one reality, one ongoing reality. How can we bring all this together? And what we did is we've created a new multiplayer model to where instead of seeing every person all the time, you know, just like on the streets of New York, where I am right now, if I go out on the streets and see the thousands of people walking the other way on the sidewalk, I really don't care who they are. They could just as easily be an NPC. And the same thing's true in most MMOs. The other people are just running by to go doing their quest, and you really don't care about who they are and what they're up to because they're not interested in you, and you're not interested in them. And so there's no reason for you to see them, or at least not that many of them. You know, 10's enough, 20's enough, 100's enough, then thousands are definitely unnecessary. And so what we do is we sort of make these mini shards, and on an ongoing process. The game is constantly re-sharding you might say, to move you into the same map and server, starting with the people that you know the best first, down through strangers and strangers and strangers and strangers, so that the game still feels basically like an MMO. But technically, if a random stranger who you were on the phone with, and why you're on the phone with a random stranger, I don't know, but if you both went on the same map with a telemarketer who was playing the game, if you both came onto the same map and tried to compare notes, you actually might not see each other. But that's because you're far enough away on the friends graph that we've cut you guys, we've separated you. And so it's sort of a new model for an MMO, and that brings people that you know well and care about closer to your physical proximity, and puts people that are further into the massive throng of strangers that would otherwise be on another shard, and pushes them out of the shard effectively that you're playing in.
Okay. I'm going to add this one in. It has to do with social media, and I think it actually dovetails here really good as opposed to later on down the list. I know that you were talking that you wanted to have social media be an integral part of the experience. Are we going to see people have like Facebook, Twitter, G+, different tie-ins like that, help maybe establish who they're sharded with on the friends list type deal?
Yeah, so I think there's some great positives to some of the tools of social media, and I think there's some horrible nightmares associated with some of the features people have put into games associated with social media. And let me tell you what we're not bringing in first, just to alleviate anybody's fears of the use of that term. You know, we're not making a microtransaction game where you're constantly pestered to buy, a pink cow versus a brown cow and pay real money for it because it's scarce. We're not even starting down that path. But knowing who your real friends are in the real world helps us favor those people to be in your shard, so to speak, in your view at any one moment. And so we'll pull that friends list from anywhere you'll give us access to it. And by the way, you don't have to give us any access to it. You can just tell us in game, yeah, that guy's my friend. I'm telling you now, that's my friend, so bring him up more often to me, thank you. But if you give us access to your Facebook or G+, or LinkedIn, or your contacts in your email, we'll just use that as a mapping to help sort those people to the front. To make sure you see those people most often. But it's not essential. We're just leveraging it as a tool because we think it actually makes your experience better.
Sounds great. We've got the prototype video loop in next to us, and people can see that there's two different map types that we're looking at. We have an overland map, and then we have the adventure scenes. Will we run into like random encounters in the world map like we've seen in previous Ultimate games, Dragon Warrior, Final Fantasy, pen and paper role-playing games? Or are they going to be like orc camps we can see and kind of run around if we don't want to interact with them?
The answer is both. In fact, in that demo loop, I think you'll see some gypsy wagons moving back and forth down the road. You'll also see a separate gypsy encampment, actually, that's actually permanently camped. You'll see a variety of other points of interest. You'll see a couple of towns, an area where there's a lunar rift, kind of the transporter of this area. You'll see a few ruined points of interest. And so both of those will have, in fact, you might even see the dragon flying around a volcano. So the moving ones can either be random encounters, or when they see you coming near, they might pursue you, but when they reach you, then you'll zoom into a combat level or an adventure level map. Or if you go onto a point of interest and you enter it, you'll get to go to that combat level map, or the exploration level map. Or if you just choose to on your own, you can, like if you're in the swamp, you might be going, hey, look, it's a new moon night. I'm out in the swamp. I might find some nightshade if I search here. You can zoom in yourself and start exploring that region. And find either the resources you're looking for or maybe an encounter or two. And we can even do things like versus see a wandering encounter that you can see coming. We can have it to where when you, this is a hypothetical one, I'm not suggesting this specifically seriously necessarily, you're going over a bridge and pop up, you might have a pop-up of a troll encounter, the troll under the bridge classic. So whether it's a pop-up surprise, whether it's a moving encounter that you can avoid or might beeline for you, or whether it's an encampment or a permanent point of interest like a town, all those, you'll find all of those in the outdoor map. And the reason why, by the way, we're doing this 2-scale map, or one of the numerous reasons, is every time we change maps, that's the opportunity for us to resort you to make sure that you're with the people you know the best and like the best. And so it's an opportunity to readjust the grouping. And so we actually want you to change maps periodically because it lets our new interpretation of massively multiplayer work the best.
Another thing you can tell from that map is that it looks like there's a fog of war that you're uncovering as you move about, and it's also uncovering in hex. I know that that's actually pretty significant too, the fact that everything's hexagonal. And also the fog of war, is that something once you reveal it at one time it's always gone, or is that something like it'll come back after a certain period of time if something's changed?
Well, great question. And our current overland map kind of quality target is really Civilization 5. So if you've played Civilization 5, that's definitely what we're trying to meet or exceed from a style and quality standpoint. So we're not there yet by any remote stretch, by the way. I wouldn't argue in the prototype, but that is kind of sort of where we're headed. And that fog of war that you see will slowly dissipate. I mean, it does dissipate as you travel around the map and does stay gone, with the exceptions of things like weather. So when foggy or cloudy weather closes in, that it temporarily remasks some of the areas you may have already uncovered. But once those dissipate, you'll go back to seeing the full area that you previously uncovered.
Okay. Moving along, what do you want to tell us about housing, or what can you tell us so far about housing and real estate and how that's going to impact in Shroud of the Avatar?
Well, one of the things I was most happy about the way Ultima Online operated was in the way, there were parts that, I'm about to say something went really great in Ultima Online and then kind of ran out of control. I really loved the way in Ultima Online, as people were setting up businesses, that location mattered. I remember very distinctly that if you were one of the top blacksmiths of the world, you operated specifically near the city of Trinzik, because Trinzik had the best public areas to forage, and people would build houses near the entrances and exits to Trinzik. And that if you really wanted to make a lot of money because you're making some of the top stuff, you really wanted to have that piece of real estate. And so those pieces of real estate became truly, actually monetarily valuable at a significant level, because we're in the when you're in the retail business, location, location, location makes a big difference. Within UO, where it went awry was people began to buy properties and scatter the world, litter the world with empty houses that were never cleaned up, and ships were abandoned in the oceans, and you built eventually bridges from island to island of abandoned ships before we learned to really clean that up. But in Shroud of the Avatar, housing, every town and every city, every village has a core of that town or city or village that has some NPC-run infrastructure. A shop or a bank or a theater, a guild hall, whatever it might be. And but then there's also lots of property around it for player housing or player businesses. However, unlike UO, where you literally could just build anywhere and everywhere, and so it gave that sprawl of just endless housing all over the world, in our case, you really have to build within the confines of a city or a town. It doesn't mean we can't continually add more in the landscape as the story or players might demand it or need it, but we won't literally corner to corner every square on the map with houses. And so houses in this case, or buildings, any building in this case, are actually going to be more rare than they were in Ultima Online, and especially because the world is one shard. It is one copy of reality, so we're not going to have 15 copies of the entire world to which means you split up your housing, times 15. And so if a lot sells to one person, that lot is used by the one person in the universe that has that lot. And so we're actually thinking that housing is going to be even more valuable and rare in Shroud of the Avatar than it was in games like Ultima Online.
Okay. So I've got the property. I've got the store. Now I need a good to sell in this store to actually have a business. So how are we going to make those goods? Can you tell us about the crafting system? Is there going to be rare resources? Can it be something I do just on my own and not be an adventurer, just be a crafter?
Well, last question first. Yes, we're very much looking for this to be a game where you can live out a very full, rich life fully as a citizen of the world, and you do not have to follow the. You don't have to either go fight monsters and level up in that sense of the word, nor follow explicitly the storyline. Although we want you to be able to do all those things. In fact, it's a classless game. You don't have to decide, I am this class and therefore I am not that class. Even if you are a blacksmith, you can learn how to wield a sword and whack people on the head every now and then if you want. But to answer the first part of your question, which is how is that process? We try to set up as much as possible each of the non-combat professions, as we generically call them, to be complete economic loops. And so, for example, in the case of blacksmithing, there is one set of skills you can learn and invest your experience in, which is to do things like mining for those rare resources, or to refine those rare resources into, like say, iron ore into iron. And then there's another set of skills that you might call the blacksmith skills that it might be cheaper or easier for you to buy your ore or steel from somebody who's already taken the time to go to the dungeons and dig it out, because that person had to at least be in danger, and therefore might either need some combat skills or have a combatant with them. Then they can sell you those resources or ingots, whatever they might be, and then you can craft them into the fine weapons and other equipment that you'll turn around and sell back to players. And so that's one of our initial ones, is exactly that loop I just described. Another one is the foraging, farming, cooking loop, where, again, there'll be rare resources out in the wilds. There'll be some resources you could even grow yourself. And then those all become ingredients, not only in the general sense of cooking, but cooking is a bit of an alchemy too, so there's a slight overlap even between what you might be able to create that is not just purely for sustenance, but might actually have some other game effects.
Okay. And a little bit more about the economy. So I've got the house and I've got that store. Do I constantly have to be logged in and at my house or wander around the world saying, hey, I got good swords, come buy them? I mean...
yeah, and the answer is no, you do not have to be logged in all the time. In fact, while some people might, while they are online, enjoy standing out front hawking around wares, because you can, being the pitchman. I like being the pitchman. Like right now, I am the pitchman for Shroud of the Avatar, and it's actually a role that I really enjoy. I love going to E3 and being the pitchman for the games we make. But I'm glad I don't have to be the only pitchman, and I'm glad I don't have to be doing it 24 hours a day. Although it seems like right now I'm doing it 24 hours a day. But also other players when they're offline. First of all, don't forget, if you build the greatest blacksmith shop in the world, anybody playing the game will see your greatest blacksmith shop in the world there. And they can wander over to it and see exactly how you've decorated it, see exactly the swords you've made. And every shop can or should or will, there's a kind of a mix of those terms, have a vendor so that even if I'm a farmer, for example, there's a farm stand that I can have in the corner of my farm where the vendor is there. Even though I'm not online, my vendor is always online. And the reason why that vendor is important is also, don't forget, this is not a, quote, traditional MMO. And so a lot of people are going like, well, hey, what happens when a person who's not my friend or not my friend's friend or my friend's friend's friend, so they don't see me in this new interpretation of how the technology works, how are they going to come and buy my incredibly special sword? And the answer is because your NPC vendor is seen by everybody. And so everyone sees your shop, everyone sees your vendors. We just don't think it's important that you see 10,000 people. Since it's on one shard, it literally would be a gigantic mass of people, all strangers flooding by your shop. We'll show you enough to make sure you know your shop is well attended, and you'll see the high frequency of buyers at your wonderful place. But there might be some that are buying that technically you're not actually seeing because they're technically on another shard, but you are still reaping the benefit.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that this is a classless game. You're not pigeonholed into one track. Skills are something that are discoverable and that you learn. And I know that emoticons, or not emoticons, but
emotes.
Emotes, there we go. Emotes are going to be teachable, and some are actually going to be limited to backers only. So if I walk around and I see my editor and I give him a rude gesture because he maybe do something I didn't want to, I can now teach him that rude gesture.
If you wish.
If I want, or I can keep
it
for myself.
And if he'll pay you handsomely for the lesson.
Exactly. Can I teach him now how to be a good blacksmith?
So there's really two kinds of, two categories of skills or activity. Well, there's really three. There's combat skills. And you know, those combat skills will be, you know, for example, if I'm learning swordplay, it might mean thrust and a chop and a parry and a riposte, and those are all skills you'll invest your experience in to get better and better at combat. Well, you can't just give away a level 3 combat move to somebody who's level 1 who hasn't filled in the rest of that tree. So no, you can't just go arbitrarily teach somebody an advanced combat move. Similarly, for the non-combat professions, similar for cooking, you know, if you've become or not even cooking, let's say you're you know, a wizard, level 5 wizard, you can't teach somebody else a level 5 wizard skill if they're level 1 by all means. But for all the social skills that don't have what I'll call a leveling tree associated with it, those are all open for this kind of person-to-person transfer. And we like the person-to-person transfer more than just giving it away, because if it's just on a list and you go, oh look, we put up 5 new emotes and now there's 5 more things in this giant list of 200 emotes, that's not nearly as cool, we don't think, or as useful in a social lubrication standpoint. We'll just give it away to people, and the people we're going to give it away to first are our closest friends and allies, which are the Kickstarter folks. We're going to just hand out to all of our early backers all of the things like emotes that we put into the game as we put them in the game. And then for anyone else in the game to learn them, they'll have to learn it from one of those people. And for some emotes, what I'll call the simple emotes, it then becomes a chain letter, so to speak, where person A can teach it to B, can teach it to C, can teach it to D, and eventually everyone will know it. But the source will always be the in crowd. But there are some that we're actually going to make even harder to spread, where it will require it to be taught. A skill could be, like, let's say, to moonwalk. That might be a tough enough skill to where just saying I want to show you how to do it doesn't mean I'm really good at teaching it to you sufficiently for you to really be able to learn it well. So you actually have to become a master and a teacher of that skill in order to be able to teach it. So the person you taught it to won't be able to hand it down because they're not a master. And so some of those will literally be so exclusive that they'll only, at the beginning and forever, be held by our Kickstarter supporters.
I'll be the character that's in the skinny jeans that's too cool to teach how to moonwalk.
All right, excellent.
All right. Let's talk about there's a day-night cycle in the game. What beyond just being a cosmetic thing will the day-night cycle represent?
Mm-hmm. Very good question. And for those who remember my middle Ultimas, I loved doing not only day, night, and weather, but cosmology. And we're putting all that back in here into this game. So, for example, there is a prophecy that you will learn more about once we've exposed the story of the game that explains why every new moon night the dark forces are rising up and conquering town after town after town. There's a method to their madness. There's a pattern to their behavior. They're searching for a particular result, shall we say, through this action. And so at night, the game becomes far more dangerous. Some towns actually become under siege, including the town you live in may come under siege. If your town comes under siege, all the NPCs are running around with their head, screaming, and yeah, exactly. And in fact, a lot of times people's houses, including your house, may have fire on top of it. All the shops will be locked. Your house will be locked up. And so if you come back to town like with some treasure from the dungeons and you want to go store it in your house, you might not be able to get in there. and or if you're coming back to your house to get the magic sword you need for the special quest that you're on, you may not be able to get it until you either wait for all that to pass, under the assumption it does, and or you help free your town from this enslavement, in which case now you can go back and store or get the materials you needed. So that's just a simple example, but there's much more. There's things like the lunar rifts I was referring to. The network of teleporters that go around the world are all based upon the phases of the moon and all really become active at night, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, let's talk about the name for a second. It's Shroud of the Avatar, Forsaken Virtues. So virtues, these are something that you've touched upon in past Ultima games. How will these impact my play in this game? Like if I take it upon myself to stop wolves from attacking peasants, it will word get out and people start to treat me different? Or let's say that I'm low in health and I don't want to stop the wolves because I'm afraid to kill me and I just let those people die and I go about my way. Will that have a negative impact on me?
Interesting moral question, isn't it? So what is the right thing to do under that circumstance? And that is the moral quandary I want people to worry about. But what we're going to do, so let me give you a little more. So that, by the way, would be what I'll call the simplest level of behavior analysis. And we will do that. And by the way, we'll do exactly what you said, including take into consideration whether you're injured or fully healthy or how we think you would compare against those. And we're only going to dock you for things that are, obviously chicken. Or feeling indifferent. We're not going to dock you for stuff that it's a close call in any way, shape, or form. But again, that's the simple, obvious thing of okay, I need to be the nice guy. The things I enjoy much better. I mean, like if I look back at the virtue and morality stories that I've told, and this will go into every piece of fiction that we're slowly, when we haven't released much, but every kind of clue, even the little bit of backstory I just told you about the dark forces rising up against towns, they are to a significant degree a ruse. And what I mean by that is my favorite Ultima cover was Ultima 7, The False Prophet. And in Ultima 7, it shows you, the heroic avatar, standing on the chest of this red, horned, winged, clawed gargoyle that's scratching at your legs in your triumphant conquering of this obviously evil race. And you may not know the story for Ultima 7, or some of the listeners might not know, but in Ultima 7, you're set up at the very beginning of the game. The gargoyles are after you. They try to kill you. They're wiping out the surface of Britannia. It's obvious they're the bad guys. You go out to try to stop them. But as you start playing the game, you realize that these gargoyles aren't mindless creatures. They have families and homes and technology and writing. And if you bother to figure out, like go to their books and get translators and read what they have to say, you actually find out that they're not unjustified in their attempts to stop you and what you have been doing to them through your behavior on the surface and even in previous Ultimas from their point of view. And so what I do is I kind of set you up. I kind of teased you. Most modern people would not describe themselves as bigots because in modern life we've now think that all religions and ethnicities and genders are largely equal because we are an enlightened people. But I would actually argue that we're all still victims of what you grow up with the archetypes of what you grew up with. We all grew up looking at books where things with wings and horns are evil. And that's really sort of the same way we were all taught to be racist and sexist in the past, was having parents tell you those things are different than us or less good than us. And so I like finding ways that I can actually show people that you're not as free from bias as you might think. And so we're working very hard to make sure we tell a story in Shroud of the Avatar that goes way beyond the surface of, be nice and everything's fine and dispatch the bad guys and things will be good. We're trying to go much deeper than that and create a story that really analyzes you, the player, finds out, really tempts you to expose your actual real personal weakness, so that we can have the game, frankly, exploited against you and teach you how you can, in fact, overcome your own shortcomings and really rise to be what I'll call a worthy successor to the past.
All right. The story for Shroud of the Avatar isn't just limited to what we're going to see in Forsaken Virtues. You actually, from my understanding, have an arc of 5 chapters set up. This one's going to be tentatively slated for release at the end of 2014, and each subsequent chapter, which would be its own standalone game, are at least scope and size, its own game to follow afterwards. So they're not really expansions. What happens if I can't or just don't buy a future episode right when it comes out? Will I still be able to play this game and interact with my friends, or am I just kind of out of luck until I get the next one?
Well, how this is different than, say, Ultimas 1 through 9. A standard retail solo player game, you buy it, you play it, and it has really no association with the sequel. They're in a completely different game engine. Any updates you put in that first game engine wouldn't, frankly, work on the data set for the earlier game, etc. What we're doing in this case is we're launching the first continent. And that first continent, which is really the scale of a full-blown Ultima, the story is the same as a full-blown Ultima. Then, when we release Episode 2, it's really a whole new continent. They would sit beside that first continent of approximately equal amount of content. And so we've just doubled the total content, but you can always still, if you've only bought and played number 1, you can still play as long as you want on number 1. And your friends that go over to number 2 might even be able to bring some cool things to see back from number 2 that you've never seen before, a new sword or something that was found over there. And you'll see it over here because it's really running in the same engine. And if we update the engine to make 2 better, it'll update for number 1 also. So your game will improve, the richness of your experience will improve just by virtue of the fact that we're making enhancements for the next version. But you won't be able to go onto that new continent until you pay to unlock that client and that story. And the same thing's true for, it's map number 1, episode 2. Episode 3 is actually, doubles the size of the world again. Episode 4 and then episode 5. So the world is always rectangular, so it makes a nice cloth map. And but effectively doubles in size with each release.
All right, and what happens in 7 years after Episode 5 is released? We've got current MMOs such as UO, which you worked on, which just turned 15. Dark Age of Camelot's 11, EQ's 14, 2's 9, WoW's 8. We've got MMOs that are, past a decade, coming up on a decade. Are there plans?
Well, in fact, I would argue that any of the truly successful MMOs have never died. They're all still going. All the best ones, or most all the best ones, are still going to this day. So yeah, we're planning for forever also. But we have a storyline that absolutely wraps up in 5 episodes. So the what I'll call the linear story completes in 5 episodes. But that being said, we already have a what I'll call prologue story that is just for the world itself. What is my role within the broader story and within the group of other friends and family that are playing? You do have an epilogue story to continue playing somewhat indefinitely. But even beyond that, if we still have any level of popularity, of course we'll go on and try to think of whatever hypothetical episode 6 might be. But it really will almost be. But the story we started with will have concluded. So we'll have to bring a whole new pantheon of stories at that point.
All right. We haven't really talked about the Kickstarter very much, other than the emotes being played into it. You guys have had 20 updates through your Kickstarter emails telling people about the different information you're going to have, and you've just recently showed the last of the stretch goals and even added additional content in for people that have already pledged or people that might pledge, such as originally your cloth map, which you're kind of known for, was at 125, and it just came with the first episode. But now, if you already bought it, or if you buy it at this point at the 125, you get all 5 chapters and the cloth map. What other kind of things have you added in recently that players may have already purchased, or what they can strive to get now?
Well, we've actually gone back at, our goals have been multifold in the sense of we're both trying to bring people who were not willing to commit at all to commit at any level, to get people off the fence who are just watching and waiting to see if it's their time. And of course, we're also trying to get people to ratchet up. We're trying to say, hey, if you're in for $50, what would it take is there anything we could offer you? They would bring you up to $60. And so, honestly, the list is so long, I would have a hard time. I'd have to, pull up the screen to look at it to even see myself. But it starts with the following. What we basically did is the stuff we went live with at the beginning of the Kickstarter was the stuff we knew was in the baseline version of the game we wanted to ship with that met those targets: Ultima 4, Ultima 7, Ultima Online, even a little bit from Tabula Rasa with the control points. And we said, okay, we're going to ship that. Then we started talking with the community, and like one we're looking at right now. So this is not an offer, but it's one we're trying to figure out. In fact, I actually may have been in this one. I'll have to look back, but it's either one in this one or we're talking about bringing it out on Thursday, which is a lot of players are saying, look, in addition to my homes, I want to have something like a houseboat. And so our whole team's been going like, houseboats, that's actually a really cool idea. So the whole team over the last few days has been thinking about houseboats and how we can get them into the game, make sure it doesn't blow our budget, see if we can figure out a metaphor by the way the code will just make it work. And as we get that wrestled out, we end up putting it in one of those price points, so that we get not only make it a stretch goal, to where if we get up to those tiers, that's a whole new system we can bring on for everybody. And then we also say, and by the way, if you pledged at a certain level, you can have one for free at the beginning. And so we've added just tons and tons of things.
Didn't see houseboats today. Did see farms. So Thursday, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Houseboats. Is that going to be one of the stretch goals? Is that going to be past the $2.5 million where you got the Oculus Rift sitting at?
Well, if it didn't actually show up today, it means the team hadn't finalized it today. So I won't know until tomorrow when we sit down and figure out what the team has figured out about how they can pull that off. But in fact, we just did a live chat on Google Hangout chat where the artist Stephen Danielle was noodling even as we were chatting. There was going, how can I do a houseboat? Let's see how we can make this work. So that's our current flight of fancy as a team. But there's been tons of others, whether it's giving out housing. Cloth mops, as you noticed, obviously a huge popular one. We're now giving out specialty armor, so almost all the tiers now have unique armor associated with them that you can only get during the Kickstarter. And a new technology we turned on for that was to be able to put a family crest on your own armor or a crest that says you were one of these beta participants, and it's early in the Kickstarter era. So, but anyway, if if anybody's even pondering it, please go look at the latest update and just see how much value we believe we've pumped into joining us on the Kickstarter.
It looks like your next stretch goal, which you're about 70,000 away from, is your 1.4 million, and it's taming.
Yeah.
Care to elaborate what taming is and why people would want to go out there and up their
Yes, exactly. So so what taming is, so we already have, in an earlier stretch goal, we already brought on pets. And so that really meant, pets that you'll be able to buy from an NPC in the game of a fairly limited variety. It might be, dogs and cats and familiars, but we've also added in combat pets. So you might be able to, take a wolf with you that might, fight by your side. But taming, if we get to our taming goal, then we're going to add in another little skill tree associated with going out into the wild and taming some of the creatures that you see in the wild. And so that as your skill goes up as a tamer, you'll not only be able to tame the wolf that you find in the wild, but ultimately perhaps the dragon that you find in the wild, which obviously would make you a much more formidable person as you wander the land with your dragon on your side.
Right. One of the topics we haven't talked about yet tonight, and I think could eat a good next 15 minutes or so, PvP. UO, Sandbox, it was, PvP was definitely an integral part for that game. How are you going to have PvP make sense and work for Shroud of the Avatar?
Yeah, well, in this case, I think this goes back to why I think we're sort of a new type of game again, because we're also, in this case, trying to serve two generally thought of as in opposition masters that people are somewhat skeptical that we can pull this off, but in our early tests and machinations on it, we think this will work. There's kind of two schools of thought. There's the PvPers who are like, look, I really just want, the thing I loved about UO is it was the open sandbox where I could really just go steal from anybody. I could try to find really clever ways to entice people to go out in the woods and rob them. All kinds of fun from the PvPers standpoint activities. And even a lot of the non-PvPers that were experienced players also found great fun in that dynamic. But then there's also the people who are either beginners or purely in there for the social experience. They really just want to be a bartender in some lazy town and buy and sell fish from the fisherman that comes in from the river. That they really don't get enjoyment out of having somebody just come sweeping through and burning down their shop. And for them, they're going like, look, if you do that, I really just don't want to I don't want to be part of this project. I'd much rather play in a solo player game where that's not going to happen to me. And so we're trying to be respectful and encouraging of both those camps. What we're going to do is we're going to make it to where beginners and people who live in these protected cities really don't have to worry. But there's all kinds of really good reasons, really powerful reasons, that if you're somebody who's really trying to become, the best blacksmith in the land or really take on a position of power, either you or somebody under your employ is going to have to go out into the area of danger. And so therefore, I believe we have plenty of plot-based encouragement and story and world pressure to get a very large fraction of the community to be willing to expose themselves to those kinds of dangers, which I think is good for both the people who are excited to go out and face those dangers, as well as the people who like to be the hunter.
Okay. Another topic that I've seen kind of breach up lately, especially with some of the Kickstarter rewards, is the whole pay-to-win label. And it was actually over something that I consider pretty innocuous. But it was the eternity fruit, I believe is what you called it. Where you had a seed, you could plant it, gave you a fruit, you could consume the fruit, it would heal you to full. You get back the seed, you can plant it, and do it again. And you're only getting one of them. It's not like you get tons of just instant heal pots. But there's already people that are like, oh, it's a pay-to-win system. What do you say to people like that on the lunatic fringe, where anytime you introduce something to your game that could have a monetary value to it, that it's a pay-to-win, I'm not going to touch it?
Well, so obviously you and I agree on this perspective just by the way you introduced it. I think there's two angles to look at this. One is I really don't think that is a pay-to-win example. So first let me just talk about that particular item. That particular item, as you very correctly noted, it is a single piece of fruit that will heal you exactly once. I mean, most people carry around a dozen healing potions, right? I mean, for 20 or 30 or 40.
Yeah.
This is a single piece of fruit that will heal you completely exactly once, and it will leave you with a seed. You must actually go all the way back to town, plant in your garden, wait some unknown, we haven't decided exactly what period of time, overnight or whatever it is, 10 minutes, whatever, and it produces a new piece of fruit, which you can then take back with you out in the wilds and repeatedly use. It is not nearly as powerful, fundamentally, as a handful of healing potions that's in your pocket. That being said, it is permanent. It doesn't cost you anything. It's not going to be an economic drain. And we're even, make these to where, hypothetically, there's only going to be, however many, few thousand of them in the world as happen to come out during this Kickstarter. And so, for anybody to even be able to amass, a handful of them will be a mighty trick to pull it off. But I imagine somebody will do it. But I would want to. I'd be willing to pump in a little money into the game to be able to have a pocket full of these healing fruit that I can then just replant and have my basically a pocket full of healing potions that after I paid that much an effort for them, I never had to pay for again. And so I think it is an economic shortcut, no more or less than the economic shortcuts of us, for example, giving people a permanent house that they don't have to pay upkeep. We're going to put upkeep into the housing just so that nobody abandons a house for 6 months and wastes one of the very rare and precious plots of land we have in the game. If you're not there in the game playing and actively, paying in virtual currency, in the in-game currency, your taxes, so to speak, well, then we'll pack up your house and get it off the map for a while and let somebody else use it. But so I don't think that one's any worse than that. That being said, the pay-to-win, even the theory of pay-to-win, I think is interesting because if you think of any game, almost all MMOs have some form of gold farming that goes on inside of them. And as soon as you do, you basically have introduced a pay-to-win. So there's almost always some kind of shortcut to pay-to-win if you're willing to cross that bridge. And the only times where it's been out, like one of the few places it's been out, is in games like Magic 101, where it has a very controlled economy and no player can sell anything to any other player. And Ray Shelley, the designer on Magic 101, was actually one of our designers. And so that's actually one of the debates we have regularly, is how closed should our economy be to keep out inflation and to keep out gold farming, or how open should it be to allow players to directly interact and trade directly at any price they want, one-to-one, which immediately means that if you and I can negotiate the price between each other, it means there can be both inflation and real money can be traded on the side, which can affect the output. And so it's an interesting problem, but I don't think we have violated any of the premises, any of the standards yet.
I agree. Let's talk about virtual reality for a second. That's kind of the 2.5 million stretch goal. Probably a little out of reach, you know, to be realistic with the last 4 days left. But we all, I shouldn't say we all, but I guess word on the street is that you've got a little special place in your heart for virtual reality and some pretty strong opinions on it. Is there any way that we could see that you try to figure out some way to tie this project into something like the Oculus Rift, maybe later on down the road, even if you don't get to that 2.5 million stretch goal?
Yeah, in fact, the way that we've been trying to talk about the stretch goals and why I'm pushing for them in Kickstarter, but even if we don't make them, you know, take heart, we'll get there eventually, is the more money we have through this Kickstarter campaign, then the more things we will put into Episode 1 release. You know, the things we don't get to in Episode 1 release, we'll put as many of them we can in the Episode 2 release, and then those we don't get to there, we'll put them as many we can in the Episode 3 release, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, so you're kind of seeing our roadmap as a project. The only question is when will those things become available based upon the, you know, not only how well we're backed, but, you know, how well we sell. You know, the better the game sells, the more quickly we'll get those things in there. And so what that $2.5 million marker is, which I agree may not be makeable here, but you know, there is usually an up spike at the back end of a Kickstarter campaign. So we made a couple million. We made our first million in you know, the first maybe 5 or 6 days. So it's possible we could pull it off here in these last couple of days. But regardless, as you noted, I am both a VR fan and a VR skeptic. I can't tell you, you know, even from the first days of Origin, we built this thing called the Nauseator. We built a plywood and 2x4, a 4x4, free tumbling three-dimensional box you could sit in that we were going to put monitors and joysticks in to kind of do this VR three-dimensional movement thing. Very dangerous, never really worked. And then we even thought about
look high tech.
Yeah, exactly. And we then also try to make dual joysticks for kind of more of a probably even back in the Apple II days to do more like Crazy Climber, at least physical VR of reaching into the virtual world. Every time there's been a pair of either 3D goggles or VR goggles or head tracking sets down through the years, you know, we've bought most of them that have come to market with the high hopes that we would apply this to our game and we'd finally be at the era of virtual reality. And fairly universally, we've been disappointed with results. Either the head trackers are too slow, or the display screens are too low res, or the parallax between the two eyes that you have on there is you know, gives you a headache or is just hard to see. But I actually am finally beginning to believe we're approaching the day that it's finally going to happen. You know, from what I can tell about the Oculus Rift, it looks like it's really solved a big part of that problem. I think head trackers are now fast enough, the screens are now high enough resolution, the ability to do parallax for your eyes is finally being nipped. You know, I think audio tools are now powerful enough to make that happen. I even see, you know, technologies for displays that project into your room, use the interior walls of your room as a reality display around you. I'm seeing those things being built by some skunkworks teams at some of the big computer and software companies. And so I think VR is going to finally come of age here in the next decade, and we might see the very first pass at it that's going to really be powerful with things like Oculus Rift. So I am optimistic that we will find a way to support that.
There will be holodecks one day. I have a feeling that's going to be a reality.
Indeed.
All right. You could leave everybody at home that's watching with one main, you know, I guess, idea or aspect of the game, or one main philosophy that you have going into Shroud of the Avatar that would really sell it to them. Because, like you said, you are the pitch man. You know your cough there. Looking for the hard sell. What's that one thing you want them all to know that make them go over to your Kickstarter page right now and either throw in money or up their back? Well,
you know, I think that if you look at the games that I've made in history, and especially the Ultima series, at the very least, I think I can convince people, if they're not already a believer, that the Ultima series represented a very unique journey in role-playing. Ultimas have always tried to do things that others did not. You know, the solo player Ultimas were amongst, if not arguably, the first computer-based role-playing games at all. Ultima 4 really was the first time we tried to tell a story that was about you personally, and not about you playing Conan the Barbarian, but was doing psychoanalysis of you and your behavior, and holding a mirror up to your behavior to challenge you personally as to whether you were worthy. By the time I got to Ultima 7, I think no one else was trying to do these deep sandbox games of trying to create a world that wasn't just a pretty picture and a backdrop and for which you get to fight monsters and collect treasure, but the world itself was part of the interaction and part of the joy of play. And then finally, when we produced Ultima Online, there have been, people have been networking games together since the beginning of computers, but they were either text MUDs or graphical MUDs and other, much simpler kinds of structures. And even though they had a lot of the same kinds of tools that we did put in Ultima Online was the first major investment and a major release at this high level of production values, and it flew the door open for massively multiplayer games. So, I think I can argue that me and my team have regularly advanced the state of the art in very important ways. And I think with Shroud of the Avatar, we're not only going to do, I think, a very honorable homage to the works I've just mentioned in the past, but we have a great plan for how to take role-playing games into the future. And at the very least, in a very unique direction compared to the level-grinding methods of most MMOs these days, and compared to the fairly, the beautifully told but not very diverse or not very personal stories that are told in a lot of solo-player games. And so I would basically say, trust me, we've done it before. Look at what we're planning now. I think we can demonstrate to you that we can do it again, and I sure hope you join us on this journey.
Thanks for taking time to join us, Lord British. I really appreciate it. For everybody at home, if you want to go ahead and take a look, you can find Shroud of the Avatar on Kickstarter. You can also go to, I believe it is www.shroudoftheavatar.com and find out more about the game. We'll also upload this interview, so if you joined us late and you didn't get to see it in its entirety on mmorpg.com, you can also find it on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/mmorpgcom. Have a great night. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rob.